don't know that the rest of this will do what I want it to do. Oh, well, I was under the assumption that this wasn't working, but it actually is. Okay. All right. So, theme of light. John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is the one we're really familiar with. But if you read this from the perspective of this proto-Gnosticism, this early Gnosticism that we're seeing in Thomas, it has sounds just like that. He was in the beginning with God, the Word. And then there's this shift here about light. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So, first of all, we're going to start talking about light here. And he says in this case that life was in Jesus, and that life that was in Jesus was the light of men. Probably meaning light to men, not the light that was within men also. But it's kind of hard to tell from the context. It's not explained in that way. And then he changes tense to make a statement about light. Light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And this is one place where I strongly disagree with the way the ESV translated this. The King James Version is better than this. The King James Version says, the darkness has not comprehended it. But even that's not exactly right. Because this word right here is this kataleben, Greek, means to grasp something, to grab hold of it. But it can be used metaphorically the way it is here, and then it starts getting a little fuzzy as to the exact meaning. But really, if they just translated it directly, I think they would have been better. Because the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not grasped it. But one reason they may not translate it that way is because it sounds a little Gnostic. Because when the light shines into the darkness, those that are dark can't grasp it. And that's kind of the idea. That's what it was meant to mean. And in verse 9, he goes back to this theme and says, the true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. So John here is talking about how Jesus was the Word, was in the beginning, everything was made through him, and that he was light. Light that would be grasped by some and not others. Those in the dark would not grasp him.
If you look at it in physical, a flashlight cuts through the darkness. But if you look at it spiritual, only those that receive what he gives would get the light.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, this theme is also in Thomas, and it's actually a theme that the Gnostics went back to over and over again and expounded upon. And there's a reason why they kind of fell in love with this idea. So here's one example of it. His disciples said, show us the place where you are, for we must seek it. So this is where Jesus is at the time they're talking to him. Well, where was he when they were talking to him? He was standing right in front of them. So it's not that they didn't understand where he was. So they were talking, Thomas is presenting this as a metaphor. Show us the place where you are, for we must seek it. So he's talking in a spiritual term. They're talking in spiritual terms there. And he said to them, anyone here with 2 ears had better listen. He who hath ears to hear, let him hear. There is light within a person of light, and it shines on the whole world. If it does not shine, it is dark. This is very much like the verses that we have in the canonical Gospels that talk about fruit. If you are a tree that doesn't have fruit, you're not really a tree with a fruit tree. But if you have fruit, people will be able to see your fruit. This is the same idea. A person that has light will be seen, and if you don't have light, it's clear that you're dark. You want to be a person of light, not a person of dark, because if you're a person of light, that means you have that knowledge that you need. This is the one we're going to bounce off of, though. Jesus said, if they say to you, where have you come from? Say to them, now, if somebody asks you as a Christian where you've come from, what are you going to say? It's not the kind of question that people ask in a spiritual sense very often. Where have you come from? So this is basically being presented as a teaching tool, because it's not a question that people ask except in passing. So this is a way to start a conversation, basically. If somebody asks you where you're from, you say to them, we have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself, established itself, and appeared in their image. So unravel that. We have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself. So we don't think of anything coming into being by itself. So the idea is the point that it's making here. The light came into being by itself. If you tie it back to what we just read in John, it's the same thing. Not anything was made that wasn't made through Jesus. And he was with God. So this light that came into being by itself, if Jesus was responsible for light coming into being, where did it come from? From Jesus, which was itself, because Jesus is light.
Stop it.
This is the way the math works in Gnosticism. So it came into being by itself, then established itself, and appeared in their image. The there is not clear there. Is that their God or is that their man? It works both ways in Gnosticism. So if they say to you, is it you? Say, we are its children. And we are the chosen, the elect of the living Father. So you are not light, but you are the children of light. And if they ask you, what is the evidence of your Father in you? Say to them, it is motion and rest. That means nothing to y'all, I'm sure. But to people that were familiar with Greek teaching, philosophy, and to a certain extent mythology, this meant something, this motion and rest thing. And it became, once the church fathers started developing a more Greek perspective on their religion, and particularly Augustine, this actually makes it into Christian theology. So, where did the world come from?
God created it.
Right. Go back to Genesis 1. Where did the world come from?
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So this acts like he all of a sudden came into being, but it says he's always been. So
yeah, I'm a little not sure about what Thomas's perspective was on that. Later on, we'll see that there are various perspectives on that in the early writings, and specifically with the Gnostics. But so God created the world. God created everything. And how did he create it? He did it. He did it in a certain number of days. Okay, and so in those 7 days, what happened?
Motion.
He worked and then he rested.
Motion and rest.
Motion and rest. That's where it came from. So that's what this means. What is the evidence of your Father in you? Say to them, it is motion and rest. The act of creation followed by resting in what has taken place.
But they had to say it in a super special way.
Yes, they did. In essence, the idea here is the same thing we've been talking about. You get this special knowledge, and then you can rest. because you've got the special knowledge.
I could have said on the gas and then on the brake.
But this is all related to this notion of light. Why is it related to the notion of light? Where did light come from?
God and Jesus.
So, Genesis 1:14. God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of heaven to give light on earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning was the fourth day. And this has always been a big problem. Why is this a big problem?
The days.
Because you're already up to the fourth day. God just now created the sun and the moon and the stars and all that to give what? Was there light before this?
Yes.
Why?
He was the light of God, the light of the world.
Because what's the first thing he did? What's the very first thing? In the beginning was the Word, and after that, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and did what? So the first thing he did was create light, but not this stuff. And this is something that they latched onto. Because what is God? God is light. And the first thing he did was say, "Let there be light." In essence, when God created the universe, the first thing he did was create light. So what is light?
Is it an expression of God?
It is, but let's talk about it in a practical way. In physics, what is light?
Absence of darkness.
The
Yeah,
ability to see.
But the foundation of light is energy, power. The whole universe is made of light. The whole universe is made of light. If you break it down, every single thing is just something, it's just some form of energy. That's all it is. And even though they didn't think about it in the terms that we think about it in these days, that the scientists have broken it all down into math, that's something about the way these later Greek ideas, specifically the Gnostic ideas, approached it. Light is power. In the beginning, God released his power. That's basically the way they're thinking about. God said, "Let there be light." Because the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So there's already something there. And then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So God revealed himself basically to what he had already done in the way this is laid out. And God saw the light was good and separated the light from darkness and called the light day and the darkness night, and evening morning were the first day. So that's what they're working off of here with this concept of light. And that's how that gets interpreted back into what we were just seeing in the Gospel of Thomas, but also to a certain extent in the New Testament. This idea that light and the things that produce light that we see are separated in some way. It's almost as if they were thinking of the light in two different ways, two different kinds of light. So it's always kind of been a puzzle as to whether or not the account in Genesis was trying to present that idea or not. But obviously they were, the idea going back to the book of Genesis even was that even though the sun and the moon and the stars have light, that's not the source of the light. The source of the light is something else. God was able to say, "Let there be light," before he did any of that. So this idea of this lightness coming from God and the lightness being more than just what we think of as light goes all the way back to the book of Genesis, and that's what these Gnostics were interpreting when they talk about the light being from God. Where this ends up going in Gnosticism is that the light, because light is the source of everything, God is light and that is the source of everything, then we all carry light around inside of us. So some Gnostics end up with this idea, and remember, the way Gnosticism eventually evolves pretty consistently is that spirit is good, matter is not. And matter in a Gnostic brain is not light. Light is spiritual. So light is good and darkness equates with matter and it's bad. But so with some Gnostics, everybody has light in them and not everybody exposes that light. In other cases, that's not the way it works. In other cases, you either have light or you don't. So we'll run into this over and over again as we go through some of these things.
In the Gnostic review, doesn't that the good news is not that we live forever. The good news is that we are all sons of God, is what a Gnostic would think. Is that right?
Yeah, but it's also, I can't remember where this is, but it's in the New Testament. It's in the latter epistles. It may be in 1 John. There's a verse that says that it just went right out of my head. But it's that basic idea that the gospel was the coming of light. Your ability to become a son of light was the gospel. It actually puts those terms together in a verse. So it's interesting, and that was interesting when I ran across that. I hadn't remembered that one. But again, that's kind of what I want you to see is that what we're reading in the New Testament is already heading in that direction. People already had these associations in their brain. Now remember, these are just words. By themselves, they don't mean it. They're just trying to convey an idea. The idea is something that you grasp beyond the words. And so that's this whole thing with once you get past the New Testament, but in the New Testament too, but once you get past the New Testament, all this stuff is really just trying to explain something with words that people have in their head. That's not really words. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes it's hard to describe an idea that you have in words, and that's what they were trying to do. So they come up with all of these metaphors that try to say it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. So there's lots of that. So as we go forward, you'll see these various different approaches to describing what God is and what He is in men. So we'll come back to this over and over again. But this whole idea of light is something that will recur. All right. So from here we go to the deity. I really like this one because it's not Gnostic in any way. It is a practical New Testament teaching. And that is what deity means. Teaching. It's the teaching. The beginning of the book is the teaching of the Lord to the nations by the 12 apostles. That's how it starts. And what it is a handbook. It's a guide written probably in the late 1st century. So when the New Testament was basically finishing up, this is where somebody or somebodies sat down and wrote out how you're supposed to church. And so you get a glimpse of what the New Testament, we always talk about wanting to be like the New Testament, to be a New Testament church. Here we go. This is how you be a New Testament church. And so you can probably guess it's not exactly the way we do things. but you get a glimpse of what it was expected of, what was expected at the time of a Christian and of a church. So this is going to be interesting for you, I think, and I think you'll see that we need to change the way we do certain things if we want to be a New Testament church. All right. So we'll pick that up in 3 weeks.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?